This play is sponsored by the California Civil Liberties Public Education Program, a state-funded grant project of the California State Library.
Now, LA Theatre Works continues our production of Judgment at Nuremberg by Abby Mann.
Your Honor, yesterday the tribunal witnessed some films. They were shocking films, devastating films. As a German, I am ashamed that such things could take place in my country. There can never be a justification for them. Not in generations, not in centuries. But I do think it was terribly unfair to show these films, in this case, at this time, against these defendants. And I cannot protest too strongly against such tactics. What is the prosecution trying to prove? Is it trying to prove that the German people as a whole were responsible for these events? Or that we were even aware of them? The secrecy of the operation, the geographical location of the camps, the breakdown of communications in the last days of the war, when the exterminations rose into the millions, show only too clearly that he is not stating the truth. The truth is that these brutalities were brought about by the few extremists, the criminals. Very few Germans knew what was going on. We did not know. The most ironic part of it is that the prosecution showed these films against these defendants. Men who stayed in power for one reason only, to prevent worse things from happening. Who is the braver man? The man who escapes in times of peril, or the man who stays at his post at the risk of his own personal safety? The defense will present witnesses and letters and documents from religious and political refugees all over the world, telling how Ernst Janning saved them from execution. The defense will show the many times Ernst Janning was able to effect mitigation of sentences, when, without his influence, the result would have been much worse. We will present affidavits from legal authorities and famed jurists the world over. The prosecution has in fact presented only one piece of evidence against Ernst Janning. A notorious case, as the defense has stated, the Feldenstein case. A case which never should have been reopened. A case which the defense is obliged to review now. The defense calls Mrs. Elsa Lindow. Mrs. Lindow, what is your occupation?
I am a cleaning woman.
Where are you employed?
345 Großplatz.
Mrs. Lindow, did you know Lehmann Feldenstein?
Yes, I knew him.
In what capacity?
He was my employer in 1935.
Did you know the witness, Maria Wallner?
Yes.
In what capacity?
She was a tenant in the building.
Did you ever see Miss Wallner and Mr. Feldenstein together?
Yes.
How did this happen?
Mr. Feldenstein came to see Miss Wallner at her apartment.
Often?
Quite often.
Mrs. Lindow, were there any occasions in which you noticed anything unusual?
Yes. I saw Miss Wallner kissing Mr. Feldenstein at the door of her apartment.
Was there any other occasion in which you noticed anything unusual?
Yes, there was one.
What was it?
I came into Miss Wallner's apartment. I wanted to clean up. I thought it was empty. I saw Miss Wallner sitting on Mr. Feldenstein's lap.
Thank you. The defense calls Maria Wallner. Miss Wallner, did you come here voluntarily? Did you report voluntarily to speak as a witness?
Yes.
Is it not true that Colonel Parker asked you to come here? Is it not true that it was very disagreeable for you to come here?
It is always very disagreeable to live over that time.
That would be in agreement with the information I have that you yourself did not want to come. Miss Wallner, the Nuremberg laws were stated on September 15th, 1935. Where were you at that time?
In Nuremberg?
Were you aware that physical relationship with Jews was against the law?
Yes.
Do you know that in Nuremberg, and Nuremberg in particular, not only a physical relationship with Jews was viewed with disdain, but every social contact?
Yes.
Were you aware that it might have some danger for you personally?
Yes, I was aware of it. But how could a friendship be discarded from one day to the next because of...
That is another question. I did not ask that question, Miss Wallner. Were you aware of it?
Yes, I was aware.
And yet you still continue to see each other?
Yes.
Do you remember it was brought out at the trial that Mr. Feldenstein brought you things? Candy and cigarettes?
Yes.
Remember that he sometimes brought you flowers?
Yes. He bought me things, but it was because he was kind. He was the kindest man I ever knew.
Miss Wallner, do you know the witness, Mrs. Elsa Litnow?
Yes, I know her.
Was she a cleaning woman in the apartment you lived in?
Yes.
Did Mr. Feldenstein come to see you in your apartment?
Yes, he came to see me.
How many times?
I don't remember.
Several times?
Yes.
Many times?
Many times.
Did you kiss him?
Yes, I kissed him.
Was there more than one kiss?
Yes, but not in the way you are making it sound. He was like a father to me. He was more than my father.
Did you sit on his lap?
Objection, Your Honor. Counsel is persecuting the witness in the pretext of gaining testimony.
Objection overruled.
I cannot accept this ruling, Your Honor.
I'm afraid you'll have to accept it.
The defense is being permitted to reenact what was a travesty of justice in the first
Colonel
place.
Parker, the tribunal makes the rulings in this case, not the prosecution. You may continue.
Did you sit on his lap?
Yes, but there was nothing wrong or ugly about it.
Did you sit on his lap?
Yes.
You sat on his lap. What else did you do?
Your Honor.
What else do you admit to?
Stop it! Stop it!
What else?
Are you going to do this
What
again?
else?
Are you going to do this again?
Your Honor, the stress Herr Janning has been under is so great he is not aware of exactly...
I am aware. I am aware.
Your Honor, I believe the defendant wishes to make a statement.
Your Honor, I believe the defense has a right to
Order.
request...
Order! Does the defendant wish to make a statement?
Yes. I wish to make a statement.
Your Honor, I believe the defense has a right to request a recess so that I may speak with my client.
Your Honor, the defendant has the right to make his statement now.
Tribunal will recess until 10:30 tomorrow morning.
Herr Janning, what are you doing? What do you think you're trying to do? They've had going. Frank, Stryker, it's enough. Do you think I've enjoyed being defense during this trial? Do you? There were things I had to do in that courtroom that made me cringe. Why did I do them? Because I want to leave the German people something. I want to leave them a shred of dignity. I want to call a halt to these proceedings. If we allow them to discredit every German like you, we lose the right to rule ourselves forever. We have to look at the future. We can't look back. Do you want the Americans to stay here forever? Do you want it? I could show you pictures of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Thousands and thousands of burnt bodies, women and children. Is that their superior morality? Where do they take us? Do you think they know? Do you think they have any concept of our problems? What can I say to you? What can I say to you to make you see?
There is nothing you can say.
Herr Janning, do you wish to make a statement before the tribunal?
I do.
Proceed.
I wish to testify about the Feldenstein case because it was the most significant trial of the period. It is important not only for the tribunal, but for the German people to understand it. But to understand it, one must understand the period in which it happened. There was a fever over the land. A fever of disgrace, of indignity, of hunger. We had a democracy, yes, but it was torn by elements within. There was, above all, fear. Fear of today, fear of tomorrow, fear of our neighbors, fear of ourselves. Only when you understand that can you understand what Hitler meant to us. Because he said to us, lift up your heads, be proud to be German. There are devils among us, communists, liberals, Jews, gypsies. Once the devils are destroyed, your miseries will be destroyed. It was the old story of the sacrificial lamb. What about us who knew better? We who knew the words were lies, and worse than lies. Why did we sit silent? Why did we participate? Because we loved our country. What difference does it make if a few political extremists lose their rights? What difference does it make if a few racial minorities lose their rights? It is only a passing phase. It is only a stage we are going through. It will be discarded sooner or later. The country is in danger. We will march out of the shadows. We will go forward. And history tells us how well we succeeded. We succeeded beyond our wildest dreams. The very elements of hate and power about Hitler that mesmerized Germany mesmerized the world. We found ourselves with sudden powerful allies. Things that had been denied us as a democracy were open to us now. The world said, go ahead, take it. Take Sudetenland, take the Rhineland, remilitarize it, take all of Austria, take it. We marched forward. The danger passed. And then one day, we looked around and found we were in even more terrible danger. The riots that began in the courtroom swept over our land like a raging, roaring disease. What was going to be a passing phase had become a way of life. Your Honor, I was content to sit silent during this trial. I was even content to let counsel try to save my name. You have seen him do it. He has done it in this courtroom. He has suggested that the Third Reich worked for the benefit of the people. He has suggested that we sterilized men for the welfare of the country. He has suggested that perhaps the old Jew did sleep with the 16-year-old girl after all. Once more, it is being done for love of country. It is not easy to tell the truth. But if there is to be any salvation for Germany, those of us who know our guilt must admit it, no matter the cost in pain and humiliation. I had reached my verdict in the Felsenstein case before I ever came into the courtroom. I would have found him guilty whatever the evidence. It was not a trial at all. It was a sacrificial ritual in which Felsenstein the Jew was the helpless victim.
Your Honor, I must interrupt. The defendant is not aware of what he is saying. He's not aware.
I am aware. My defense counsel would even have you believe that we were not aware of the concentration camps. Not aware? Where were we? Where were we when Hitler began shrieking his hate in the Reichstag? Where were we when our neighbors were being dragged out of their houses in the middle of the night to Dachau? Where were we when every village in Germany had a railroad terminal where cattle cars were filled with children who were being carried off to their extermination? Where were we when they cried out in the night to us? Were we deaf, dumb, and blind?
Your Honor, I must...
Oh, maybe we didn't know the details. But if we didn't know, it was because we didn't want to know.
Traitor! Traitor!
Order! Order! There will be order! Put Herr Hahn in his seat and keep him there!
I am going to tell them the truth. I am going to tell the truth if the whole world conspires against it. I am going to tell them the truth about their Ministry of Justice. Werner Lampe, an old man who cries into his Bible now, an old man who profited by the property expropriation of every man he sent to the concentration camp. Friedrich Hoffstetter, the good German who knew how to take orders, who sent men before him to be sterilized like so many digits. Emil Hahn, the decayed, corrupt bigot, obsessed by the devil within himself. And Ernst Janning, worse than any of them, because he knew what they were, and he went along with them. Ernst Janning, who made his life excrement because he walked with them.
Your Honors, it is my duty to defend Ernst Janning, and yet Ernst Janning has said he is guilty. There's no doubt he feels his guilt. He made a terrible mistake in going along with the Nazi movement, hoping it would be good for his country. But if he is to be found guilty, there are others who also went along who must also be found guilty. Herr Janning said we succeeded beyond our wildest dreams. Why did we succeed? What about the rest of the world, Your Honors? Did they not know the intentions of the Third Reich? Did they not hear the words of Hitler broadcast all over the world? Did they not read his intentions in Mein Kampf, published in every corner of the world? Where is the responsibility of the Soviet Union, who in 1939 signed a pact with Hitler and enabled him to make war? Are we now to find Russia guilty? Where is the responsibility of the Vatican, who signed the Concordat Pact in 1933 with Hitler, giving him his first tremendous prestige? Are we now to find the Vatican guilty? Where is the responsibility of the world leader, Winston Churchill, who said in an open letter to the London Times in 1938, Your Honors, were England to suffer a national disaster, I should pray to God to send a man of the strength of mind and will of an Adolf Hitler. Are we now to find Winston Churchill guilty? Where is the responsibility of those American industrialists who helped Hitler to rebuild his arms and profited by that rebuilding? Are we to find the American industrialists guilty? No, Your Honor. Germany alone is not guilty. The whole world is as responsible for Hitler as Germany. It is easy to condemn one man in the dock. It is easy to condemn the German people, to speak of the basic flaw in German character that allowed Hitler to rise to power, and at the same time comfortably ignore the basic flaw of character that made the Russians sign pacts with him. Winston Churchill praise him. American industrialists profit by him. Ernst Janning says he is guilty. If he is, Ernst Janning's guilt is the world's guilt. No more and no less.
What do you mean they won't let you have it? Well, you can commandeer them. We want every plane that can fly in the air. Tad, just a minute. Hello. I know there are some of them that don't know the territory. I know there are some that have never been to Berlin. Major, we have to give the military governor every help we can give him. We have to get 700 tons in the air a day. 700 tons. Oh, this airlift is some operation. We have to get 700 tons of produce to Berlin every day. Did you ever think we'd be flying coal and tomatoes in these crates? Tad, we've always been good friends, and that's why I called you in. I want to know what you're going to do in the courtroom tomorrow.
You know damn well what I'm going to do.
Now, here's the problem, Tad. Hitler knew what he was doing when he rehabilitated Germany. He marshaled every important industrialist, politician, military man, judge. You convict these men, you'll make communism look more attractive to the German people. You'll make them think of us as their persecutors.
You never cared for these trials, did you, Matt?
I wasn't what you call fond of them.
You never were fond of building an international criminal court, were you?
No, and I'll tell you why. We sometimes have to do things for our own security, or, if you will, our own interests. And I personally do not look forward to sitting as a defendant in a trial with those idiots at the UN as my prosecutor and judges. If you look at it that way, why not put Truman on trial for dropping the bomb?
Maybe we should.
I'll boil it down to this. We need the help of the German people. And you don't get the support of the German people by giving their leaders stiff prison sentences.
This is supposed to be a new beginning, but it's a new end, isn't it?
If you want to be one of those responsible for our losing this struggle with the Soviet Union, think if you're going to be able to live with that. Tad, the thing to do is survive, isn't it? Survive as best we can.
Just for laughs, Matt. What was the war all about? What was it about? Defendant Emil Hahn prepared, signed, and circulated reports summarizing NN cases receiving the death penalty at the following special courts on September 1st, 1942. Kiel, 262 defendants from Norway. Essen, 863 defendants from Belgium and France. Cologne, 331 defendants from France. This concludes the documentary evidence. Your Honors, during the 3 years that have passed since the end of the war in Europe, mankind has not crossed over into Jordan. Small but terrible wars rage in Greece and Palestine, and the chorus of international voices is discordant in our country. The fear of war has been revived, and we are constrained once more to look to our defenses. There is talk of Cold War, and meanwhile, men and women die in real wars, and echoes of persecutions and atrocities will not be stilled. These events cannot help but color what happens in the courtroom. But somewhere in the midst of these events, the responsibility for the crimes we have brought forward during this case must be placed in true perspective. This is the decision that faces your honors. It is the dilemma of our times. It is a dilemma that rests with your conscience.
The defendants will make their final statements. Frederick Hoffstetter.
I have served my country throughout my life, and in whatever position I was assigned to, in faithfulness, with a pure heart and without malice. I followed the concept I believe to be the highest in my profession. The concept that says, to sacrifice one's own sense of justice to the authoritative legal order. To ask only what the law is, and not if it is also unjust. As judge, I could do no other. I believe your honors will find me, and millions of Germans like me, who believe they were doing their duty to their country, to be not guilty.
Emil Hahn.
I will not say of our policy today that it was wrong when I said yesterday it was right. Germany was fighting for its life. Certain measures were needed to protect it from its enemies. I cannot say I am sorry we applied these measures. We were a bulwark against Bolshevism. We were a pillar of Western culture. A bulwark the West may yet wish to retain.
Werner Lempe.
Your honors. Your honors.
Ernst Janning.
I have nothing to add to what I have already said.
The testimony has been received in the case. The final arguments have been heard. There remains only the task of the tribunal to render its decision. The record is closed. The tribunal will recess until further notification.
This is the last of the papers of the Night and Fog decree. Do you have any more than that, Ken?
Nope, that's all.
Now, I've collected some precedents here that bear on the basis of the case. The conflict between allegiance to international laws and the laws of one's country. Dan, we have a mountain of stuff to go over here.
Yeah, what are you looking at, Dan?
I was just looking at the pictures attached to some of the warrants for arrest.
What pictures?
This is a picture of Peterson before they operated on him. Here's a picture of Maria Wallner. She really was 16 once. Mr. Feldenstein. Here, case of a boy. Must have been no more than 14. Executed for saying that the Reich might lose the war. Authorized by the jurisdiction of Frederick Hoffstetter.
Now, I think you will find this more pertinent. This is from the French chief prosecutor before the International Military Tribunal. Now, he writes, "It's obvious in states organized along modern lines that responsibility is confined to those who act directly for the states, since they alone are in a position to judge the legitimacy of the given orders. They alone can and should be prosecuted." I can't see that the prosecution has put forth a really clear-cut case against the defendants.
What about Yoning's confession?
Regardless of the acts committed, I don't see how we can interpret it that the defendants were really responsible for crimes against humanity.
What do you think, Dan?
Ken, we've been going over these documents for 2 days. If it isn't clear by now, look at these precedents and opinions. Look at them if you're interested at all.
I'm interested, Curtis. You were speaking of crimes against humanity. You were saying these men were not responsible for them. I'd like you to explain that to me.
I've just been explaining it. I've been explaining it for 2 days.
Maybe. But all I've heard is legalistic double talk and rationalizations. Curtis, when I first became a judge, I knew there were certain people in the town I wasn't supposed to touch. I knew if I wanted to remain a judge, this was so. But how do you expect me to turn my back on millions of murders? How many we don't even really know?
I'm sure he doesn't mean that, Dan. There is, after all...
I'm not asking you to turn your back on them. I'm asking you, what good is it going to do us to pursue this policy?
Well, now we know how those men in the dock felt, don't we?
What do you mean, Dan?
They committed murders for the good of their country. Now it's being suggested that we let murderers go free for the good of our country. Isn't that it? I'll tell you something, Curtis. I'm afraid for all of us. How many future genocides will happen unless we draw a line right here?
There's a world outside this courtroom. Our country is in danger. That doesn't seem to mean too much to you.
Curtis, you're saying they weren't responsible. You're going to have to explain that to me. You're going to have to explain it to me very carefully.
The tribunal is in session. God save the United States of America and this honorable tribunal.
The trial conducted before this tribunal began over 6 months ago. Simple murders and atrocities do not constitute the gravamen of the charges in the indictment. Rather, the charge is that of conscious participation in a nationwide, government-organized system of cruelty and injustice in violation of legal and moral principles common to all civilized nations. The tribunal has carefully reviewed the record and found therein abundant, competent evidence to support, beyond a reasonable doubt, the charges brought against these defendants. Herr Rolf, in his skillful defense, has asserted that there are others who must share the ultimate responsibility for what happened here in Germany. There is truth in this. This tribunal does not believe that the United States or any other country has been blameless of the conditions which made the German people vulnerable to the blandishments and temptations of the rise of Nazism. But this tribunal does say that the men in the dock are responsible for their acts. The principle of criminal law of every civilized society has this in common. Any person who sways another to commit murder, any person who furnishes the lethal weapon for the purpose of this crime, any person who is an accessory to this crime is guilty. Herr Rolf further asserts that the defendant Janning was an extraordinary jurist who was acting in what he thought to be the best interests of this country. There is truth in this also. Janning, to be sure, is a tragic figure. We believe he loathed the evil he did. But compassion for the present torture of his soul must not beget forgetfulness of the torture and death of millions by the government of which he was a part. Janning's record and his fate illuminate the most shattering truth that has emerged from this trial. If he and the other defendants were all depraved perverts, if all the leaders of the Third Reich were sadistic monsters and maniacs, these events would have no more moral significance than an earthquake or other natural catastrophes. But this trial has shown that under the stress of national crisis, ordinary men, even able and extraordinary men, can delude themselves into the commission of crimes and atrocities so vast and heinous as to stagger the imagination. No one who has sat through this trial can ever forget the sterilization of men because of their political beliefs, the murder of children, how easily that can happen. There are those in our country today, too, who speak of the protection of country, of survival. The answer to that is, survival as what? A country isn't a rock, and it isn't an extension of oneself. It's what it stands for when standing for something is the most difficult. Before the people of the world, let it now be noted in our decision here that this is what we stand for. Justice, truth, and the value of a single human being. Frederick Hoffstetter, the tribunal finds you guilty of membership in criminal organizations and crimes against humanity and sentences you to life imprisonment. Emil Hahn, the tribunal finds you guilty of war crimes, membership in criminal organizations, and crimes against humanity, and sentences you to life imprisonment.
Today you sentence me. Tomorrow the Bolsheviks sentence you.
Werner Lampe, the tribunal finds you guilty of membership in criminal organizations and crimes against humanity, and sentences you to life imprisonment. Ernst Janning, the tribunal finds you guilty of crimes against humanity and sentences you to life imprisonment.
Justice Ives for the minority. I wish to point out strongly my dissenting vote from the decision of this tribunal, as stated by Justice Haywood, in which Justice Norris concurred. The issues of the actions of the defendants who believe they were acting in the best interests of their country is an issue that cannot be decided in a courtroom alone. It can only be decided objectively in years to come in the true perspective of history.
Here is something for you to have on the plane.
Mrs. Halbestadt, if I take all the food you've given me, we won't have any room to pack anything else.
But it's strudel, George. The way you like it.
Thank you for everything.
Goodbye, Your Honor.
Goodbye. Oh, and give my regards to Mrs. Berthold. I tried calling her, but there wasn't any answer.
Yes, Your Honor, I will.
Give my regards to your young lady, Captain Byers.
That's one you owe me.
What do you mean?
Americans aren't very popular in Germany this morning. See you at the airport.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
Good afternoon.
I came here at the request of Ernst Janning. He wishes to see you.
I'm just leaving for the airport.
It's on the way. He said it would mean a great deal to him.
I'll try.
Thank you. Did you hear about the verdict in the IG Farben case, Judge? Most of them were acquitted. The others received light sentences. The verdict came in today.
No, I had not heard.
I'll make you a wager.
I don't make wagers.
A gentleman's wager. In 5 years, the men you sentenced to life imprisonment will be free.
Herr Rolf, I have admired your work in the courtroom for many months. You are a brilliant attorney. You will undoubtedly go very far. You are particularly brilliant in your use of logic. Therefore, I have no doubt that what you suggest may well happen. It is logical in view of the times in which we live. But to be logical is not to be right. And nothing on God's earth could ever make it right.
Herr Janning, someone to see you.
Herr Janning?
Judge Haywood, please, sit down.
You wish to see me?
Yes, there is something I want to give you. A record of my cases, the ones I remember the details of. I want to give it to someone I can trust.
Thank you. I'll take good care of it.
It won't do any good, but it is a record of what can happen. Judge Haywood, I know the pressures that must have been brought on you. Your verdict will not be a popular one. You will be criticized greatly. Nuremberg will not be a pleasant word for Germans for years to come. But if it means anything at all to you, you have the respect of at least one man you convicted. By all that is right in the world, your verdict was a just one.
Thank you. What you said in the courtroom, it needed to be said.
Judge Haywood, the real reason I asked you to come, I want to know, I want to hear it from a man like you. I want to hear, not that he forgives, but that he understands.
I understand the pressures that you faced. No man can say how he would have faced those pressures himself unless he'd actually been tested. But how can you expect me to understand sending millions of people to gas ovens?
I did not know it would come to that. You must believe me. You must believe me.
Herr Janning, it came to that the first time you sentenced to death a man you knew to be innocent.
By April 14, 1949, judgment was rendered in the last of the Nuremberg trials. By 1959, of the 99 sentenced to prison terms, only 3 were still serving their sentences.
This is LA Theatre Works' production of Judgment at Nuremberg by Abby Mann. Judgment at Nuremberg stars, in alphabetical order, Ryan Vincent Anderson, Michael Canavan, Jake Green, Harry Hamlin, Shannon Holt, Alan Mandell, James Morrison, David Selby, Kate Steele, Nick Torrin, and John Vickery. Stage manager Aurora Culver. Live sound effects Jeff Gardner. Associate producers Annalise Erickson and Mike Weiskopf. Honorary executive producer David Kavner. Editor Wesley Dewberry. Recording and mixing engineer Mark Holden for the Invisible Studios, West Hollywood. Special thanks to Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer Studios. Our director is Shannon Cochran. I'm Susan Lowenberg, producing director of LA Theatre Works.
This play is sponsored by the California Civil Liberties Public Education Program, a state-funded grant project of the California State Library.